Live. The recording will be available after the event. We will take questions from the media and the public after this program. So feel free to add questions to the chat box throughout the program, and speakers will address them in the Q&A. We can also leave questions on our Facebook comments, and if we have time, we will also get to those. So thank you. And as I already stated, I am Dana Kelly, co-op organizer, healthcare and climate equity organizer for Northside Rising. I work with a couple of awesome climate equity action organizations like Sierra Club, Clean Power Coalition, the Joint City County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity, and many, many, many others that I just can't call off the top of my head right now, but love working with. And so today we are here to bring information to the energy burden disparities in Milwaukee. This is something that not only affects Milwaukee itself, but it affects urban and rural areas across our nation. And in light of the end of the moratorium, the utilities moratorium, effective next week, we do need to bring to light how bad these disparities are affecting things in communities of color. So what is energy burden? It is the percent of household income that is spent on energy expenses. So in communities of color, that can be as high as 30% of your net income that is going toward heating, utilities, and water for your home. So today we have Brendan, who's going to have a presentation that's going to give us images to show and share, that's going to mention all the information that fits with this energy burden disparity that we have. This issue is especially important, just like I said, given that the disconnection notices will be going out as early as next week. So let's look at what the data shows us. We have with us Brendan Pierpont. He's senior electricity sector analysis with the Sierra Club, who will share an overview of the analysis and methodology. So welcome, Brendan.
Great. Thank you, Dana. As Dana said, I'm Brendan Pierpont. I'm a senior analyst with the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. And I've spent a bit of time recently digging into the issues and data around energy burden nationally, and excited to share some of the data and insights that we've seen for the Milwaukee area. Let me just jump in. As Dana mentioned, energy burden is really defined as this ratio of, or the share of energy of household income that goes towards energy expenditures, things like electricity bills, gas bills, and other heating fuels. Though it's really those first two that make up the majority of those expenses. And a couple of benchmarks that are used nationally pretty commonly. Energy burdens above 6% of household income, typically considered high burden, and that's used across kind of policymaking contexts and research contexts. That's a pretty standard benchmark. And then above 10% of income is considered severe. And before I jump into the data, I wanted to just share where some of this data is coming from. So for energy burden, we're relying on data that the Department of Energy put together in this low-income energy affordability data tool, or called the LEAD tool for short. We're combining that with demographic data from the Census American Community Survey, some health data from CDC. We're also looking at data on eviction rates from a project called Eviction Lab at Princeton University. And then finally, we're looking at the overlay of all of these data sources with historically redlined communities, and there's a project out of the University of Richmond, Virginia, called Mapping Inequality that's digitized many of those redlining maps from the early mid 1900s to be able to show that together. A lot of this data is at the census tract level, so it sort of represents the energy burden or demographics of a neighborhood, of a community. It's a fairly local level of granularity, but it's not quite enough for us to be able to say, like at the household level, what does this particular household or this type of household's energy burden look like? So we're able to make some inferences about that, and I'll get into that here. So first, really high level conclusion from this work is Milwaukee has areas of a concentrated high energy burden. This map is showing in the orange and red areas where that energy burden is above 6% on average across the entire census tract. And this is compared to the average energy burden across the whole Milwaukee metro area of just under 3%, which is close to the national average. But there's these areas where that energy burden is much higher. About 6% of Milwaukee metro area population, or 85,000 people, live in these areas with high energy burdens. But as I was mentioning before, the average energy burden across the census tract doesn't really get at sort of what some households within those census tracts experience. So low-income Milwaukeeans, those living below 150% of the federal poverty line, in many of these census tracts are spending 15 to 20% of their household income on their energy bills. And so you can tell that this is really a significant challenge for many communities, many households in those communities. It's just the amount of their income that goes to those monthly energy bills to keep their house warm, to keep food on the table, and all of the things that we use energy for. Second thing that really jumps out from this data is that Milwaukee's high energy burden falls disproportionately on communities of color. So here I'm showing that same map of high energy burden, showing those areas in orange and red, with another map that is showing the majority racial or ethnic group by census tract. So you can see the green areas are predominantly Black communities. The yellow-orange area and the southern part of Milwaukee is predominantly Hispanic or Latinx. And the blue is where the majority of the population is non-Hispanic white. And you can see those areas of high energy burden, those correspond almost perfectly to areas where communities of color live in Milwaukee. Another way of showing this data is kind of if we look specifically at those areas where by the predominant race or ethnicity, Black or Hispanic or Latinx communities, their average energy burden across those census tracts is more than double that of non-Hispanic white majority census tracts, and then the range is also much greater. Some of those census tracts having energy burdens of 7 to 10% on average across the tract, and again that ignores the distribution within those tracts, where some households, some low-income households, are spending extraordinary amounts of their income on their energy bills. Another way of looking at this on the right-hand side is comparing the demographic makeup of the whole metro area to just those high energy burden, those orange and red census tracts. On average, across the whole metro area, the Black population is about 16% of the metro area population, 65% of the population in high energy burden census tracts. And the Hispanic Latinx population is 11% of the metro area, but 21% of the high energy burden census tracts. And so no matter how you cut this data, it's really clear that there's a disproportionate impact of energy burden as a challenge on communities of color. Another thing that we've looked at is how energy burden corresponds to areas that were historically redlined. In the mid-1900s, federal rules are restricted lending to communities, often based on the race or ethnicity of residents in those communities, and drew maps, literally with red districts, where they said that lending was high risk and dangerous. And this discriminatory practice has led, there's countless research on this now, has led to depressed property values, decades of underinvestment in the housing stock, and limited opportunity for residents in those communities to build wealth. And so if we take these historically redlined districts that were drawn in the 1930s and 40s, and overlay that with our areas of high energy burden, we see that many of those areas that were historically redlined today are suffering from high levels of energy burden, and that's a real challenge for those communities, driven by underinvestment in those communities for long periods of time. And finally, energy burden is compounded by housing insecurity challenges and health burden challenges. On the left-hand side, I'm showing the eviction rate by census tract. And you can see that this also corresponds to many of the same areas that are facing high energy burdens, also face significantly higher eviction rates. And on the right, some of the areas with high energy burdens in the city are also the parts of the city where asthma rates are the highest. And so these communities are really burdened by a number of different challenges that compound each other. And that is where I will leave it off on the data side. Thank you. I think there will be opportunities for questions and answers later in the session, and I'll turn it back to Dana.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks so much for that information. Something kind of stuck out to me in your presentation that I hope other people saw too, with the non-Hispanic white population. They took up 67% of the population, but they only have a 9% energy burden, whereas 16% Black population has a 65% energy burden. So the scales are truly unbalanced, and we have to get equity and equality in communities of color if we want to see a change, not only in our communities, but within our climate and in our globally climate equity as well. The high energy burden also brought high eviction rates, and high energy burden also brought high asthma and respiratory illness rates. So, those are some things that stuck out to me because I've been affected by all of those things. And so we want to hear today from some energy consumers that have been affected by the energy burden. One person that we want to I'd like to introduce tonight is Cesar, a resident of Milwaukee's Walker Square neighborhood on the city's south side, who will talk about some of the impacts that they and their family have experienced. So welcome, Cesar.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me. Um, Hello, my name is Caesar. I'm an undocumented resident in the south side of Milwaukee. I've lived and worked and grown up here in Milwaukee for the past 20 years. During this past year, my family has struggled to pay for our rent, utilities, and food without any government assistance. Things have been so challenging that we were unable to pay our We Energies bill and have accrued a 4,300 total amount of debt, with a portion of that being in late fees. When my dad called to ask if we could start a payment plan with We Energies, he was told that we had to pay 25% of it upfront, or the power would be shut off by the end of that week. It was a very anxious and desperate moment for us, so desperate that we just started asking around for anyone that we knew, even on social media, for any help that we can get. That's when I found out that my father was lied to, that we had until the April 14th before our power would be shut off. I've looked around for any nonprofits that would help, but none. But to no avail. They were either out of funding or just couldn't at that moment. So it was a very anxious and desperate moment for us. And even though our family has worked and paid taxes for over 20 years, we're not eligible to apply for energy assistance. And we have tried. I've gotten as far as making an appointment and gone through the questionnaire, and we got to the question where I was asked if I was a legal resident or citizen, and I answered no. So I was told that we couldn't apply for that assistance unless there was a citizen in the home, and there is none in our home. Yeah, and I know we know that our story is not a unique one in the city. There are many families that are trying to survive who are unable to apply for government assistance because they are undocumented, but they still work and pay for their taxes like any other person, a community member does. We need the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin to extend the moratorium until the end of the pandemic. We need our city leaders to address the energy burdens as well as the rising housing crisis that disproportionately has affected our communities before, during, and during the pandemic. We need city leaders to stand up and ensure that we have a better future for our communities and that these disparities in the past don't continue. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Caesar, for your help and for sharing your story. I know that is not necessarily easy to do. I too have stories, and I've shared a couple of mine. I'm not afraid to share because I think that that's how we help one another. And we do have another powerful speaker that has a strong story in the community that is going to be able to shed some more light on how this energy burden truly affects communities of color. So I would like to introduce Tisha. She's also a resident of Milwaukee South Side. Welcome, Tisha.
Hello, everybody. My name is Letitia. I'm with Northside Rising here in the city of Milwaukee, and I have also been a customer that actually has to struggle month to month to make ends meet when it comes to budgeting. The options are pretty much just rob Peter to pay Paul. You want to keep the lights on, or if you do obtain a budget, the goal is to keep it. But sometimes there are circumstances that come up that are beyond our control where we're not able to do so. And when that happens, you get threatened to be without your lights and your gas. I know this past year has been a struggle for many people. It has been a change tremendously for a lot of people to just maintain. And in some circumstances, people have lost their income permanently. People may have lost their income temporarily, but due to income changing, it is hard to make ends meet to be able to stay afloat, still survive, still maintain, still keep a roof over your head, still be able to put food on the table, and keep your expenses afloat. Um, I was also a victim of where I didn't meet their needs in a timely manner, and I was a person who was in the dark for a moment. I have 3 adult children and 3 minor children. My older kids said, "Mom, like, what's going on?" Like, they never seen that, but it was due to me losing an income, against my will, beyond my control. So I didn't have a plan B to fall back on and say, "Hey, I know what to do. I'm gonna use this to pay it," but I didn't have it. And We Energies doesn't look at that. That's not one of their concerns. And again, just going through what we've gone through within the past year, I know that if they looked at the bigger picture, then to me, it would be a little more of understanding to say, hey, okay, well, people have lost a lot throughout the year, or may not have the same income they had prior to. And I know it's a lot to just look in everybody's individual situation, but I really think they should take into consideration of what we've gone through for the past year financially, even whether it be losing a loved one and that income is gone permanently. They just don't know where it's going to come from. And that in itself, it is hard. I just wish that We Energies might just take a look and say, hey, instead of coming up with this $600 down payment to keep the lights on or something, maybe they could waive it one time, just because we did go through a pandemic and because people did go through a lot of changes beyond their control. Even if they did want to go to work and their job was shut down, they couldn't. There was nothing they could do. And no one had a backup plan behind that. No one thought, oh, well, what are we going to do about um, helping or assisting customers, because sometimes people don't even know to go apply for energy assistance. And yes, that does help, but what about those who don't know about that resource? And I just think that they need to take into consideration that this past year has been tremendously hard on a lot of people in the community, thus far the world. And I hope they can oversee that. It's very costly at this time for everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Tisha. She is one of Northside Rising's rising stars. And I really appreciate all her resilience, even through the struggles that she has gone through during this time of hardship and uncertainty. So thanks, Tisha, for just being so awesome and great. So today, our final speaker is going to be Milwaukee County Board Chairwoman, Marcelia Nicholson. So thank you for being with us today, Chairwoman Nicholson. Please share with us your thoughts and views and how you would like to help.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly, and for all of you on the call. I stated I'm Chairwoman Marcelia Nicholson, and the idea of an energy burden is a new term for many of us, but the institutional and structural racism that leads to a variety of negative outcomes for people of color is nothing new. When people are struggling, we have to help them. And when burdens are disproportionate, we have to level the playing field. Now, as you all heard, the energy burden is the additional cost and unfair energy costs borne by people of color. And it's related to the legacy of redlining. Part of that legacy of redlining is that people of color live in older housing. It's more likely to be in disrepair, and it's a lot more expensive to maintain those older housing. And because of the levels of poverty experienced by these communities, they have less ability to make their homes more energy efficient. We've heard today from Cesar and from Tisha about how much this unfairly impacts working class and poor people, and how depressing, anxiety-inducing, and outright awful these impacts are for our families. But advocates and community organizations like Northside Rising and the Sierra Club have been sounding this alarm about the problem for a long time. And finally, institutions in the broader community are starting to acknowledge this problem. For example, we know the Public Service Commission is directing major utility companies to report energy burden data of their customers by June 1st of this year. And Wisconsin Public Radio also reported that utilities will also be required to provide info about the amount customers pay as part of their household income on energy use by county. Those include the state's largest investor-owned utilities, that's We Energies, Xcel Energy, and Alliant Energy, among others. And also, we need policymakers at all levels of government to make an effort to better understand this problem and to see it as a symptom or a result of the structural and institutional racism that we seek to dismantle every day. As a new co-chair of the City County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity, this issue is something I take very seriously. I want to acknowledge the hard work of groups like Northside Rising and the Sierra Club and bring more attention to this problem and for offering solutions. We need not just acknowledge this problem, but address it in a meaningful way. So at Milwaukee County, I'm going to be requesting a report from the Housing Division on the impact of the energy burden on Milwaukee County residents, and we'll also ask the Housing Division to present possible policy solutions to the energy burden problem, which could be incorporated into existing county programs and services. Now, these are small, but very important first steps, and I look forward to working with these organizations and other advocates to do even more to reduce this energy burden for the residents of Milwaukee County. Thank you all for all your incredible work, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Nicholson, just for your enthusiasm. I'm super excited about that and can't wait to work with you further in this champion of this endeavor. I got off the phone, or actually out of a meeting today with Congresswoman Gwen Moore's office today. And we were talking about where her heart is in climate equity. And she is one of those that are really fighting for funding and making sure that we have things like lead abatement and weatherization, especially in our community. So that was just great to hear today, and now to hear that you are now on the task force team. So I'm super excited about that. So this has been great. I hope that this has been informative to those who may not have known anything about what an energy burden is and really why you're struggling to pay your bills, but knowing that you're not alone in this. And really it is systemically set up that way. And so we have to do our part to change the system. So what we want to do in conclusion, our call to action is first to We Energies, because We Energies has a responsibility to address this and to help mitigate it. There are a few programs in place like weatherization programs, but a lot of the onus is on the renter, and they have to get collaborative work done with the homeowner, with the landlord. And unfortunately, it's not to the landlord's benefit. So it's a little hard for it to be a benefit for the renter. So we need We Energies to kind of cut out the middleman and say, hey, we're going to set this aside and allow for weatherization to take place, and we'll help fund that, or help, especially right now with the end of the moratorium coming in just a week. We need We Energies to say, hey, we have actually a profit this year, I think like 3 billion. I might be a little off under, but so let's take a portion of that and across the board apply credits to those who are in jeopardy of being disconnected. So We Energies, we're calling you to the table, take action. We also need our government agencies and officials, just like I just said, Congresswoman Gwen Moore, you, Chairwoman Nicholson, and all of those that are in position and in an authority to be able to make sure funding comes to the right communities that need the help right now. We need immediate change right now. And then we're also calling on all leaders to address this in a meaningful way, because this affects us all. This affects grandmothers, this affects grandchildren, this affects children, and this affects the working as well as the 1%. We all need clean air. We all need clean water. We all need clean soil if we want to continue to thrive, survive, and grow. So before we take any questions, I'm off my soapbox. But before we take any questions from the media, we will drop in the links to the analysis report in the chat right now. There's gonna be a version in Spanish that will be released later today. We will follow up with media contacts by email with a press release and a link to this analysis as well. Please contact Adil Trahan, the press secretary with the Sierra Club, with any further questions or interview needs. And now, Jenny, would you please facilitate the question and answer portion for us?
Sure, thanks, Dana. I would be happy to. So for the media who are joining us on Zoom, you are welcome to raise your hand and we will call on you. If you would like to ask your question orally, you can also type it in the chat. And for those who are joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to type in your questions. I notice we've gotten a few of those already and we'll get to those as quickly as we can. And actually to start off with, I know we had a question while Brendan was presenting the data for some clarifications on the graphics. Brendan, did you want to address Mary's question about the graphics and the maps?
Sorry, I was on mute. I saw the question. I didn't catch which slide that was on, and I'm happy to go back to find kind of which slide was hard to read. Mary, I'm not sure if you can voice that.
Brendan, I had trouble this one, I don't know if there's anything below the red 8%, but there were a couple in this sequence. Is this all available? The one before, back to the one before, now I can see it, but I couldn't see your color code. And this one, like, it's cut off, anything below non-Hispanic, white, and Hispanic, Latinx. There's nothing below it, and there may not be anything, but it looked like it wasn't quite all there. And then the chart on the left, I felt there was something below that too. And mine, what I can view, ends right at 0.0%. Okay. Is that included in, if I use that link, is that whole report and the graphics, is that all included at that link?
Yes, the graphics in this in the slide deck are all in that report. And
now you fixed it. I can see everything.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there with displaying the slides, but my apologies for that.
That's okay. As long as I can grab it afterwards, I'm fine.
Great.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from our media guests? Okay, great. Thanks, Matt. We've got one from Matt Martinez with the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service, who wants to know if there was any data available as to energy assistance in the most affected areas for energy burden and how many households were receiving assistance. Brendan, would you be able to address that?
So the analysis that I've done is focused on kind of the scope of the problem of energy burden, and what I have not dug into in this is sort of local programs to actually support those households. I'm wondering if I can defer to some of the local groups that have worked on this, or other speakers.
I don't, this is Dana Kelly speaking. I don't have any numbers in front of me as far as, how many households. But I do know that at this current time, 93,000 are in jeopardy of being disconnected as early as April 15th. And I do also know that only 2 agencies are handling dispersing energy assistance funding, and that is community advocates as well as SDC. So right now, 211 is making direct appointments for the agencies, as well as you can go online to get the help. But from my understanding and being in a lot of the energy burden meetings that I've had with other agencies, the amount of funding that we receive for energy assistance is not enough. If every person that needs it would apply, we would not have enough funding to sustain everyone. So this really tells us right now that even at this point, of the 93,000 that are in despair right now, everyone is not going to get sufficient help. And just like Caesar said, we got some falling through the cracks just because they don't meet certain qualifications and guidelines. So that's really disparaging.
Thanks, Dana. We've got another question from Mary asking, are any other utilities in Wisconsin or around the country offering programs to assist people who are having trouble, which could perhaps be a model for We Energies?
I can speak to a couple of examples. Won't be comprehensive, but from other places in the country. There's one program that's emerging in Detroit with Detroit Edison, which is piloting essentially using energy efficiency funds and investments targeted at payment troubled customers. So folks that are having trouble paying their bills, actually finding ways to permanently reduce the amount of energy that those houses consume, which I think is a really important piece of the puzzle. That most utilities do have energy efficiency funding, but that often doesn't make it to low-income households that need that help the most. I would also point to New York and Virginia as places where through government action, through executive order in New York and legislation in Virginia, have actually put caps on the percentage of income that can that households bear to pay for electricity bills, and they're using a variety of funding mechanisms to help support bills for customers that need that support. So in Virginia, that's a percentage of income payment plan, and I think in New York there's a I don't know what stage of implementation it is, but they're targeting to limit the household's energy burden to 6% by essentially being able to cover the difference. And I don't know if anyone else on the call has other examples of programs in the Wisconsin, other Wisconsin utilities that are offering this kind of work. Most utilities have some level of payment assistance program, but as Dana was indicating, it's far from sufficient for the scale of the challenge.
There is a portion on every ratepayers, We Energy ratepayers bill that goes toward low income families, but I'm not sure how that gets dispersed. I to my knowledge, I don't know of anyone that actually gets some type of energy assistance directly from We Energies. So there are a couple, but again, is it getting to the people who really need it?
Thanks, Dana and Brendan. We have a number of questions from the folks who are joining us on Facebook Live. We'll see how many we can get to from those. So the first question is, have we been working with focus on energy for weatherization, insulation, efficient heating, cooling?
I'm sorry, was that, you said weatherization?
Yeah, have we been working with Focus on Energy, a statewide organization, on weatherization, insulation, and efficient heating and cooling?
That is one of the main focuses that we want to begin our climate justice and climate equity campaigns, because that is first off a fast way to create jobs, and also a fast way to lessen the health impact and the energy burden immediately. These are ways you can see immediate change. And what is that? That is window sealing, that is weatherization of your doors, that is upgrading and updating furnaces and appliances, you know, and things like that. So they're actually simple fixes and not very expensive. But like I said, they do create jobs, and they will impact our health and our wealth in a positive way.
Great, thanks so much, Dana. Another question, can you explain the fixed costs versus the amount of a bill that is based on use? Guessing that's a question for Brendan.
Yeah, and I have not dug into the kind of rate structure or tariff structure, which I think this question is referring to, where for We Energies in particular. So if someone from the Wisconsin team is able to speak to that, I'd defer to them. But generally, there's often on your bill from a utility, a portion of your bill is a fixed cost that's not avoidable by using less energy, and a portion is tied to the amount of energy that's used. And the way that utilities set those levels can actually really impact the amount of opportunity to save money. If there's just a big fixed bill that you can't avoid anyway, that's a hard thing to figure out how to reduce if you're having trouble paying your bill. But if someone in Wisconsin is able to speak to the specifics of We Energy, that'd be helpful.
Brendan, I think that about explains it to my scope of ability to explain. But yeah, a lot, and that's another issue, is that most ratepayers don't even know how to read their energy bill. So they don't even know why they're being billed what they're being billed. So, you know, they don't have any type of recourse to be able to debate, you know, whether this is really a true analysis of their energy usage. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Of course, more research that needs to be done, but then there's things that can be done now and immediately, and really must be done if we want to start to see a turnaround in these disparities. We already know where the issue started, but now we have to start resolving those issues.
Great, thanks again, Dana and Brendan. We've got a number of questions related to weatherization, which we've already addressed a little bit, but these are great questions. So if there's more to add to these. So one is, you defined energy burden as the relationship between energy costs and household income. Accordingly, lower household income households are more likely to have higher energy burdens. Can you also discuss how the need for energy efficiency upgrades, especially for older housing stock, can also factor into this equation? With lower energy efficiency in these older homes, folks will use more energy to create the same level of comfort in their homes than they would if homes were more energy efficient. So that one is focused on, yeah.
So yeah,
older housing stock, yep.
Yeah, they really are speaking to the redlining issue, and basically answered their question at the end of the statement, because that's exactly what it's going to do. When you start using weatherization tactics, you start to bring down your energy costs, because your home now you're not using as much energy to make your home comfortable to live in. So right now, where you have windows that have, you know, no pane, no insulation, that has cracks, that doesn't completely seal close. Now you have energy seeping out of the windows. You have doors where you can see up under, or you can see through between the door and the actual posting. Then you have there is energy loss there as well. So again, that becomes a burden. So what does weatherization do? It seals the gaps. That's basically all it does. It seals the gap. Also, like I stated, when you upgrade your appliances as well as your furnace, now you have a less energy cost, because it's not using and pulling so much energy to be able to work. Also, you also can create and generate energy with solar panels, and now you can become a source of energy for your community as well as your city as a whole. So weatherization does all of those things, and then what does that what happens with that is particulate matter is not able to come into the home. Your air filtration quality is at a better and higher level. Just like we saw on the map, the 60% population of whites have a 9% energy burden. That also means that they have cleaner air, cleaner water, that filtration systems that they have access to, whereas communities of color really do not have. So that's what the effects weatherization will do, and it's truly an immediate effect. And again, you're creating jobs, you are creating more health within the community of color, because you're bringing down respiratory issues and other types of blood issues that come from in consuming lead. And then you are also generating wealth where you have less going out in energy. So now you can, you know, do other things to, within your family, within your home. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
and I would just add a one point from the report. There's a table in there, and it wasn't in my slides, but in the link that was shared, that high energy burden census tracts. You're right that they are lower income. Their average income is around 32,000, and the energy expenditure on average for those tracts is around $2,200 per year. If you compare that to the rest of the tracts, the ones that don't have high energy burdens, the ones that are under a 6% energy burden, those census tracts, households in those census tracts have lower annual energy expenditures of $1,900 instead of $2,200 per year, even though the incomes in those tracts are on average $80,000 a year. So you have this, both the income side of the equation and the expenditures side of the equation are both working in the wrong direction for those high energy burden census tracts.
Thanks, Brendan and Dana. We have two more questions related to weatherization. So I think I'm going to go ahead and ask them together. And the first one, Dana, this is something you and I have talked a lot about. Are there energy efficiency programs that are more available to renters where they wouldn't need to put any money up front to access energy efficiency assistance? That's number one. And a related one, wondering about the weatherization programs like those available through SDC, the Social Development Commission. Did you say the problem is the landlords? Is there a way the city or county can put pressure on them?
Great questions, because those, like Jenny said, are some of our high top priority campaigns that we're working on right now. And there is the LIHEAP, the low income heating efficiency assistance program. I was trying to get that acronym right. And that they do weatherization there. And then there's also a weatherization program through We Energies that has kind of lost traction. And the reason, again, that I state that it lost traction, it has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of the work is on the tenant, and the landlord has to agree. And so if there's not a good relationship, or the landlord really just don't care, the tenant is kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so at this point, at this juncture, no, there is not anything in place that makes it easy for the renter right now, but we are working on not only making it easier for the renter, but also making it easier for renters to become homeowners. So there are programs in place that I work with Kevin Kane, called the green loans, homeowner loans, and there's a lot of funding. To my knowledge, about $16 billion have been given into this to help renters to become homeowners. And in that, you get an opportunity to retrofit or weatherize your home, and that cost is absorbed into your purchase of the home. Or if you are a homeowner, then you can get a refinance, and that cost again is absorbed and you'll see this, you see the savings in your energy bill going lower. You'll also see the savings in your mortgage rate going lower, because the highest rate that these loans can go is 3.5%. So they actually are lower than 3.5, but the highest is 3.5. So those are just some of the programs that Northside Rising and other climate organizations are connected with and working on, and trying to just get to the public so that the public knows what resources are out there and available, so that we can start to make this turn toward climate equity. So help us by pushing the PSC, the Public Service Commission, to make these laws and these regulations for these utilities companies to help us to become more energy efficient. There are a lot of what is it called? Red tape that we come across when we're trying to make our demands. But we're going to continue to demand what we know is fair and what we know is right. But we do need help from the people, because the power truly is in the people. And the more that the Public Service Commission hears from the people, the more they have to move on behalf of the people. So we got to start speaking exactly what we need and what we want and how we want to see it. Thank you.
Hi, Jenny. Just to kind of piggyback off of the question and what Dana was speaking upon, Milwaukee does have a lot of older houses, so weatherization would be definitely a benefit to the tenant and the landlord, because they will give you energy saving appliances. They help with the filters on the sink down to the hot water heater or furnace to be replaced, as well as sealing other nicks and crannies and cracks throughout the home just to save money. The start of it is getting the application as a tenant. If you are a renter, filling it out, and then of course the landlord would have to be in agreement to the application. In the event the landlord does not agree, of course you cannot proceed because it's their home. And again, it's going to benefit the tenant as well as the landlord, because they're replacing appliances and equipment in the home that I'm pretty sure the landlord just may not be able to afford just out the gate. But it is a very beneficial program for those who have interest in it. It will help your home and save a lot of energy, honestly speaking. But again, not everyone knows about that resource or that program, or are even aware of it. And I am aware that it is through Social Development Commission.
Thanks, Tisha. Jess, we've got one more question, and it's actually directed to Tisha and Cesar. Do we have time for that? I know we are up.
Yeah, I think we can do one more question for those that can hang on, and then then sounds like a good time to wrap. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a great segue in or follow on with what you with the comments that you just gave, Tisha, and this is directed specifically to you and to Cesar, and it's getting at prioritizing funds. So asking about how should we be prioritizing funds in terms of covering unaffordable bills versus using those funds to increase energy efficiency in homes in order to lower bills in the future. So basically, how should we balance immediate needs and longer term solutions?
I think, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, for me, it's I guess that the question's putting the onus is on the renters and the people, and I kind of repudiate that. Or, I don't like the way that's kind of putting the onus on us. The We Energies has a monopoly when it comes to utilities. A lot of the landlords in the city of Milwaukee are big, like S2 Realties. They're these big realty companies that come in and buy all the low, these cheap houses, and instead of actually building something better, they just make them look a little nice, and they're still as inefficient as they were when they were built. So that's the problem. It's not that it should be on us to really do. We're trying to survive. We're working the jobs and making the money that we, because that's the, we're making those the wage that we get, because that's what we're surviving. We can't do more because we don't make more wages. If we had the money to make our houses, weatherproof and weatherization, then we wouldn't be in this crisis of us having to worry about paying for our energy bills. So it's on the city, it's on We Energies that has the monopoly on utilities to make sure that that people aren't being exsanguinated by greedy landlords and realty companies, and the We Energies that has a monopoly on energy, on energy in Wisconsin. So I think it's on leaders to do something. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, thanks, Cesar. Tisha, did you have anything to add?
Again, I just think the cost is high. That I think that if some miracle were to occur, that they could just lower the cost of the energy uses that we use. Like, for example, for me, when I moved in this house, I had to go off of somebody else's usage. Well, I never even got a fair chance to, for them to determine mine because I just moved in. So we had to go with a prior usage. Again, dealing with an older house, the cost is going to be a little higher. So, some things are kind of against our will. I think that once you do get your energy bill from We Energies, if you're able to obtain a budget, get on a budget by all means. Try to hold on to it throughout the year. But if you see that this budget doesn't fit your household budget income wise, I think that should be looked into, because sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to really go with their flow and what is offered. And then I found, just from my own experience, that my usage was different than the prior tenant, which again to me was unfair, but that's how it went. And little things like that, I think they just need to look into more. And again, I wish it was a lower cost offering than what people are actually charged. We have no competitors, so we have no choice but to utilize We Energies. So we have to deal with them and what they're the route that they take, unfortunately, because there's no one else to turn to. I can't go shop for another electric company because there's only one here in Milwaukee. So it really boils down to whatever they say goes. I feel like landlords with the older housing situation gave tenants an opportunity to, utilize the program for weatherization. I know that would be a money saver right there. Even with appliances, sometimes if we switch them, that saves us money as well. Energy saving appliances would work. Easier said than done, of course, but those are just some of my thoughts per the question that you provided.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tisha and Cesar. I think that is all the time we have for questions. So thanks everybody for thanks to the question askers and to our speakers, to Dana, Brendan, Tisha, and Cesar for fielding and answering those questions. Thanks very much. And Dana, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Thanks so much for facilitating that portion so well. And thanks to you all again for joining us today. I want to also give another special thanks to Chairwoman Nicholson for sharing her thoughts and her enthusiasm on climate equity and climate justice, economic justice in the community of color. So we are going to be signing off, but we're learning more about this important issue so we can work together and hold our leadership accountable to bring equity to the city of Milwaukee. Please contact us with any questions that you may have, and we hope that you have a good rest of your day. Thanks again.